some larger purpose, understanding about life and evolution, and will Richard Dawkins someday refer to your research because it illustrates some larger purpose?
Right. Well, I do think just studying birdsong is interesting. I mean, so there's that level. But I actually think that it's important on many levels. So first of all, just understanding why animals do perform certain behaviors, why they practice behaviors. But this would apply to more than just songbirds. And I also think I get some funding from the National Institutes of Mental Health for this, and they don't care about starlings at all. I mean, maybe they do, but not professionally. And so I think that this can have clinical implications for humans, and part of that is what you were mentioning. It got me down the road of we've got these neural circuitries that are well conserved evolutionarily. And because of that, because if you look at the songbird brain, you've got similar neurochemicals acting in similar brain regions as you do in humans, they consider this a really good model for understanding socially appropriate communication. So with many mental health disorders in humans, something goes awry with socially appropriate communication. And sometimes I talk about autism spectrum disorders, where you have individuals who can communicate at high rates, but sometimes will not respond to social cues by adjusting communication. So I lived in Omaha for a while, and there was a child there who had autism, and he loved castles. He would talk about castles. He would tell you everything about castles. And at some point, you may not be interested in castles, and you'd show signs that you're not interested, but he wouldn't pick up on those cues. So he didn't adjust communication, based on social cues that he was receiving. And then in other cases, I know that it's a spectrum, right? But some kids don't communicate at all, and it's possible that they're not motivated to communicate, and I don't know, and that would suggest maybe something's gone awry with reward systems, that communication may not be rewarding in the same way that it would be otherwise. And so I think that there are definitely clinical implications, and we're trying to identify different neurochemical systems that could motivate individuals to communicate within specific contexts. And you could look at an individual and say, maybe they could say, when they're hungry, they could say, I'd like an apple. They get an apple, and they're reinforced. That would be like a male singing to attract a female. He gets the female, and he's reinforced. So saying, I'd like an apple, that's not going to be reinforcing. But getting the apple would be reinforcing. So maybe that kind of communication is intact, but maybe what an individual might be lacking is that communication, that back and forth give and take. And I think if we can figure out what neurochemical systems are guiding communication in different contexts, and I'm particularly interested in reward, I think that maybe we could provide some insight into treatment options for people that do suffer from communication disorders or mental health issues that are associated with communication disorders or problems.
Did you come to study the songbirds from a broader or another path through just studying communication in general, or did you start with song? Did you start with the birds and then communication grew out of that?
Yeah, actually, that's for me. I guess even if you start, when I was an undergrad, I was interested in studying animal behavior. I thought it was really interesting, but I became interested in psychology, and so I worked at a crisis center, a call-in crisis center for a year, or for more than a year. But I spent a summer really, just focused on that position. And I thought, well, I felt that I was helping people, by speaking with them. But I really thought, a lot of these problems, just talking to them is not going to help. And I became interested in the brain. I took some neuroscience courses. And then I thought I would like to, I think I'd like to understand the brain. So I got my PhD in psychology, and I ended up studying homing pigeon navigation. So there was there was a guy who came to the university, and he was really energetic, and I thought, that'd be a cool guy to work with. So I don't know, it matched my interests really well, and I thought I'd like to work with this guy. So I studied homing pigeon navigation, how homing pigeons return home, which is fascinating. And while I was there, we would read different articles for seminars, and I had heard about birdsong. I became more and more interested in evolution, and so for postdoctoral training, I shifted my focus, and I started to study, first I looked at Japanese quail, male sexual behavior, and how the brain controlled different components of sexual behavior. And at that point, I hadn't really planned to study perhaps birdsong neurobiology. But while I was there, I knew I was coming back to the States, and I was going to work with somebody who studied songbirds. And at that time, people discovered the song control system. So songbirds have a very specialized group of interconnected brain regions that's devoted to song learning and song production. And you don't see these brain regions in hawks or quail or chickens. Their vocalizations are primarily unlearned. But in these birds that learn these really elaborate courtship songs or songs to repel rivals, you've got specialized brain regions that you don't see in any other animal species. Humans have something similar though. We have specialized brain regions for vocal learning and vocal production, and songbirds have something similar. And so I started, at that time, I thought I really do want to study these songbirds and the song control system. So I started to study starlings. There was a guy in Belgium, that's where I was doing my postdoctoral work on quail. And so I started observing his birds in aviaries. And if you put a female in, the males would sing like crazy. And I said, well, that's sexually motivated. And the song system didn't regulate sexual motivation. So I thought, well, brain areas involved in sexual motivation have to stimulate these birds to sing. And so that's sort of where I got started, and that's kind of my niche, I guess, is to study brain regions outside of this song control system and how they ensure that a bird sings the right kind of song in the right context. So it started with this courtship song, which is sexually motivated, and it may not sound surprising, but at the time I was really excited by the fact that brain regions involved in sexual motivation regulate that kind of song. They probably contribute a motivational component. You have to sing this kind of song because you're in this context. There's a female, sing a courtship song. My beginning wasn't really I didn't plan to study vocal communication. I sort of, I guess I followed my interests, and now I think it's fascinating, and I don't see changing my research emphasis.
So, does your research speak to why rock stars have groupies and scientists don't?
Why rock stars have groupies?
Actually, that might be starting to change. Have you heard about the ROS, Rock Stars of Science campaign?
No, that sounds
They've actually a lot of big rock stars and celebrities are pairing up with scientists to actually give them publicity, and they're helping. It's to promote science.
Yeah. I mean, help them reproduce.
Well,
yes.
No, but it's a whole public awareness of science, and
that's great.
but they call it I just read about it. It's called ROS, Rock Stars of Science, and they're just highlighting scientists that have done really groundbreaking research or anything like that, and some heavy metal guitarist will show up on stage with them and go, yeah, this guy's really great, sort of thing,
I love that.
Yeah,
well,
we'll
I think Cameron Diaz said, did she say actress or supermodel I'm a zoologist trapped in the body of a supermodel?
Yeah.
So one of my good friends who's a scientist, she goes, well, I'm a supermodel trapped in the body of a scientist.
Actually, at the recent science fair, there was also these videos. They call them the science cheerleaders, and they're all professional cheerleaders from like the Dallas Cowboys and all of the big. But when they interviewed them, they would say, I have a degree in neurobiology, and all of these. They're real cheerleaders, but they have real backgrounds in science, and they really know their stuff. So
they couldn't get jobs, or why are they cheerleaders?
they probably make more money as cheerleaders. Who knows? But they're legitimate, and I think most of them have PhDs. The ones in the videos. So, hey, brains and beauty can obviously go together.
You have a question?
I had a question about gray catbirds. I used to work as an ornithologist, but it was over a decade ago, so feel free to tell me if I was completely wrong. I have terrible memory, but with gray catbirds, they seem to be mimics, and I would work in the field, and I'd hear, wow, that's a yellow warbler, but it sounds like shit, and it would turn out to be a gray catbird picking. And they also seem to be, we call them followers, because as we be going, it was really a pain in the butt for us, as we were going around on our routes, they follow, so it's hard to count them. Is that a new catbird, or is that the one that was back there?
Oh, that's interesting.
Really inquisitive? So why do birds call mimics, and how do they get taught? They don't even seem to have their own song, really.
Yeah.
Piano sound, but they didn't much have it. How are they alive? What's the motivation
Why are they
to mimic other bird songs?
It's a good question. So mimicry, well, the starlings that I study are mimics also. So if you were to raise a starling, they will mimic human speech. And you can go on YouTube, you can find these great videos of starlings mimicking human speech really well. So they're also mimics. And the mimicry, I think that it contributes to an elaborate song repertoire. And people are interested in mimicry and why why is there vocal mimicry occurring. Females, I'm not aware of, there are studies showing, what females prefer in song, and I don't know of the literature looking at how well a particular other species is mimicked. But females do prefer to mate with males that produce the local dialect. So the males, they learn their song from tutors, and when females are growing up around other males and they give an option, they can choose the males that grew up, singing their local dialect, or males that sing a slightly different dialect. So the birds, they're learning, so there's going to be variation in the song. Females will prefer to mate with the males that sing the local dialect. And so the idea is possibly that they're getting some information about the male. If he's poor at mimicking the local dialect, maybe there are other problems. Maybe he didn't get enough food as he was developing or learning his song. Maybe he's got parasites or something like that. And so the idea is that the best males, the males of highest quality, are the best mimics. And so, when the males are including that song, it is providing a message to the female. And then in terms of why they're following around, I don't know, but I know that we've experienced this just in our backyard where we saw, we were going, oh, look, a robin nest, the baby robins. The next day, crows ate the robins. And we think that the crows are following us around. I mean, we saw them there, and we think that when we identified the nest, they used us. That gave them information about, it's a different topic, but maybe that's why they're following you if you're looking for nests.
Did you feel guilty?
Oh, well, we really were puzzled about it for a while. I don't know if that's what happened.
That's when the cops lead the beds to the witness.
I think we did that.
Are you familiar with Peter and Rosemary Grant study the Galapagos?
Yeah, well, the beak of the
What did they find? That I heard a talk by them a while back, and gosh, it's been a couple of years now. So I guess they said that the female finches that ended up in another community or in with another species would respond to the males from that species songs, and not the species that they came from. Or if I believe that was correct.
Well, so it's the different populations of birds.
Yeah, I believe they said that if the females,
I have to remember.
if the females were raised by, that sometimes a female, I don't know how exactly it happened that a female was raised or ended up in a community of a different species of finch, but they would respond to the male. They would respond to the male songs from the other species and not their own.
I know that there's certain issues related to outbreeding, and so if a male is producing a song that's extremely similar to the song of a female's father, it would not be a good idea to mate with that male. It could be a sibling, right? And so you do want to mate with a bird that's producing a song that's similar but not identical, perhaps to the song of the father, to avoid inbreeding.
So the songs are.
So that may have been what.
So songs will vary between families?
They will vary. So because they're learned, of course, they can vary a bit.
I think he was saying these were baby birds that were raised near birds of a different species, so that they preferred the birds of the species that they were hearing rather than their own species.
So is it that? So the bird. Okay, so it's a species difference. So they.
Yeah, the Galapagos
okay,
finches.
Okay. So I think that's because the song is learned.
Yeah.
It would be the same thing. It's like learning your local dialect. And so they would learn that particular song, and maybe that would be most attractive. You see that even Conrad Lorenz's early studies showed that if you looked at imprinting, geese would imprint on basically the first thing that they see. And so a goose hatches, and it will follow other geese around. So typically they're going to see their mother, and that makes sense. But if they see a human, they're going to follow that human around. And when they grow up, they tend to prefer to mate with humans as well, which really isn't an option. But so you kind of
Greek mythology.
Yeah, this is referred to as sexual imprinting. So they must have imprinted on that early song and felt that that's the species with whom they should mate.
Have there's been studies done where birds are able to learn over time. Some birds have been deprived of a tutor, so there's really no way that them to learn. What are they saying in that situation?
Yeah.
Is there anything about that? Because I'm a little surprised that it's